Good morning, Santa Clara. Oh, come on, one more time. Good morning, Santa Clara. All right, here we go. All right, so we promised you some technology expositions, some conversation about what's happening in terms of the latest and greatest in terms of thinking about connecting, and to level set with questions that are maybe uncomfortable, but necessary for us to address. So it's my warm pleasure to bring to stage here shortly, as soon as we transition, to bring to stage a set and collection of experts that range in the value chain with regard to IoT. From those who pull and create value that then by definition creates more demand, that creates companies to go create, all the way down to a company that actually makes the componentry that then allows for us to actually create this conversation. Here we go. All right. Yeah, you can strike that. That's fine. Great. All right, great. So yes, it's going to be my warm pleasure to welcome to stage, here just briefly, as soon as our hands walk off, a collection of experts from the industry to have a conversation. Now, I promised them I would give you the 2 sentences that I gave them beforehand. Number 1, this is completely unscripted. We did not actually meet per se and discuss topics or questions. The idea being that we are all professionals. If we found ourselves in a bar one day, each representing the respective company, the respective technology organizations that we come from, what kind of conversation could unveil? And that's what you're going to see this morning. My promise to them is my questions will be challenging, but they will in no way, shape, or form be embarrassing to the speaker or to their company. So with that as the groundwork, please join me in welcoming, first to stage, Scott Harkins, Vice President of Honeywell. CTO and founder of SmartThings, Jeff Hagins. Morning, Jeff. General Manager, IoT for SAP, Nayaki Nayyar. Morning, Nay. And last but not least, please again re-welcome Dejan Rasuo, Vice President, Spirent. Good morning.
Good morning.
Should we try it around? All of us? Good morning, Santa Clara.
Good morning.
All right, there we go. So I've given you their names, and I gave you their titles. And sure, some of you sit here saying, oh, I know those companies. They've been around for a long time. Or you're quickly Googling to figure out a new company because you maybe not have heard it before. So rather than leave you in mystery, what I'm going to ask each one to do, starting with my far right, is to introduce themselves and give a brief overview about the company, but in a way that you probably don't understand or know them, and to give context to the conversation that we're about to have. So if you would, please, Scott.
Sure. Hi, I'm Scott Harkins, Vice President Partner Development for Honeywell. Many of you probably know Honeywell as a large industrial organization. That's kind of the reputation we have. We're a company that makes things, the T in IoT. But over the last several years, we've gone through a significant transformation into a software company. And my specific role within the organization is to develop a developer community, create opportunities via our various IoT solutions to create software as a service opportunities, and manage the reach out to the startup community. So really excited to be here and look forward to the panel.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining. Jeff.
Hey, Jeff Hagins, founder and CTO at SmartThings. And you may know SmartThings as a home automation solution that sells at various retailers and online. But at SmartThings, we're really focused on shifting the supply chain for applications and services for the home. We're trying to create a model and a platform where developers start to look at the home in the same way that they look at the mobile device. It's an opportunity to make money by creating applications and services that go into your home.
Fantastic. Nayaki.
Nayaki Nayyar. I head up the IoT go-to-market division at SAP. I'm sure you all know SAP as a company, one of the largest enterprise software providers. In the IoT space, John, we have defined, you heard Tanya speak yesterday, in this framework of what we call things to outcome. Because the number one question we get from our customers is, where is the money? How do I generate net new revenue streams? And we are very much focused on building business applications that generate what we call outcome-based scenarios for our customers. And I will share with you as we go through the panel.
Fantastic. Great. Now, Dejan, I know they've all heard you this morning, but why don't you give an introduction to who you are and what you do?
My name, John, is Dejan Rasuo, and I head business development for Spirent Communications, predominantly in the embedded connectivity and subscription management space. Spirent is a very old company, so they're over 100 years old, but in the recent past, they have primarily been in the test and measurement equipment and service providing to MNOs, OEMs, semiconductor companies. And as of late, Spirent's ambition is to get into IoT and remotely manage the devices, remotely deploy those services, and is looking to form an open ecosystem of partners in order to be able to provide for live certification, live testing, and live management of those devices.
Excellent. So I'm just going to do a sound check. Back room, can you hear us okay? We had some conversations yesterday. Maybe the back room did not hear us. Everyone, can you wave? You okay? Can you hear in the back? Okay, great. Excellent. All right, so first question, and it's an open question, but I actually will direct it to you, but I do want everyone else. So where is the money? And what I mean by that is we've talked, I mean, you've heard billions, trillions, gazillions of devices are being connected, lots of data coming. Everyone wants a piece. Everyone's changing to become a service provider. We had that conversation briefly about, I'm not selling tires, I'm now going to sell miles used. If everyone converts to that, where really is money and what actually happens to the capital structures of the industries when we don't buy things, but we lease them or whatever the new word's going to be?
Yeah. So it's a very interesting question, John, we get from our customers very often. And that's why we have defined what we call outcome-based business models, right? As companies connect things, we could have gazillion of devices or things that could be connected. But at the end of the day, what companies are looking for is what is a net new revenue stream, net new business models, net new customer experiences, how do I reduce my turnaround time, maintenance. That's where the money is. And it's a journey that they go through as they connect the things to get the insights, insights to actions, and actions to outcome. A great example, like I mentioned, I was talking to a large tire company. They said, Nayaki, we are evolving our business model of not just in tires, but to sell mileage as a service. That's a completely different business model, evolution of a business model. My favorite really is Under Armour. I know you all know Under Armour as a brand. Under Armour, just if you look at 10, 15 years back, it was barely even known. Today, they're not only competing with all the majors, the Nikes and the Reeboks of the world, but they have effectively evolved their business model of not just selling fitness products, but selling fitness as a service. So this evolution of business models is what IoT is really enabling companies to do, because now they can connect to the things, and now they can look at what are the new business models, revenue streams, and customer experience they can drive with that.
Excellent. Well, so you talk about business transformation. I mean, we got to jump right. Honeywell is well recognized, I mean, over 100 years old, and an industrialist of the massive proportions, and you're now a software company. What does that mean? And then driving to what Nayaki said, how do you guys find the money? What does it mean for you to be a software company, yet also still build hard product?
Yeah.
What does it mean for your corporation, and how do you make things like what Jeff wants to do, which is to open up a platform or to create the dialogue for developers, to then allow connections like that Dejan saw? How are you guys contemplating that? How are you changing yourselves to actually make that happen?
Yeah, good question. Actually leads back to your first question as well. So you're right. We're a company that makes a lot of things, and I don't expect that will change anytime soon. So certainly part of the business model is we make something that has value and we sell it for a price that includes some profitability. But as we've gone through this software transformation, we have found other interesting ways to create value to those very same products or connected products. So whether it's something as simple as a thermostat, and going back to the services conversation, right? Thermostats, generally when you purchase a thermostat as a consumer, you're not sure why you're buying it. Your old thermostat probably broke. A contractor is telling you to buy it, but the use of a thermostat is really about keeping yourself comfortable, right? Most people that buy programmable thermostats or non-connected thermostats purchase products and then never actually program them. So going back to the services conversation, thermostats as comfort as a service is a new interesting space that we're starting to explore. Business model innovation, right? Finding different ways with all of the connected devices that we sell across many different categories, both in the smart home space and the smart building space. Collecting that data that first and foremost help us improve our own products, understand how people use them, make changes to make it better, put the product back in the market, learn from the consumer, make the product better, put it back in market. It's a flywheel effect. And then that connectivity opens up all types of new business models. I use comfort as a service as only one example, but we have dozens of different ways to create revenue streams for ourselves, for Honeywell, very selfishly, but also for our partners. So while we are certainly have a channel to market via retail to the consumer, we're also highly leveraged in the professional contractor space, whether that's HVAC contractors, building management firms, or home security or business security companies. So it's a pretty wide value stream. We want to create value for Honeywell, but we also want to create value via software for our partners.
So far, so good? Working out?
Yeah, it's going very well, actually, yeah. Yeah.
You want to jump in?
Well, I think what everybody's hinting at here that we see that is really inevitable in this space is the platform kind of opportunity here, right? If you look at the smartphone market, right? Ask yourself the question, right? What would we have today in the smartphone market if there had never been a platform for developers to create apps on that phone, right? If we had been limited to the innovation coming from the manufacturers of those devices and only got the new features and new apps that they wanted us to have, where would we be? I mean, I think it would be a fairly grim kind of picture, right? The home, businesses, enterprises, industrial use cases, they're all very similar from an IoT perspective. The more we have platforms for developers to create solutions and services on, the faster this evolution will go and the more mature these solutions and services will be.
So that actually brings up an interesting conversation, which we kind of talked about yesterday, just briefly. But we connect everything. We make platforms available. We give people SDKs. We follow the standard rules. And hey, developer, we get evangelists. We get everyone gets excited about platforms. Do we have enough in regards to our training and our understanding and the technologies for security in terms of giving people tools to allow them to connect the things that we've just been talking about inward? Like you briefly talked about software and security SIMs, right? Software security in terms of SIMs and the inability or maybe the inefficiency or the ineffectiveness of the current SIM play. So where are we at really, and how do you guys want to play? I mean, I didn't even realize you were a 100-year-old company. So how do you guys want to play in this business transformation, introducing software to companies like Honeywell or SmartThings saying, hey, this is how we really got to connect, that then allows somebody like SAP to really bring value out to this bigger audience?
But the technology is out there. The conversations are not happening. Everybody's still making their existing customers happier, even though that the developers are saying, like, help me out here because I don't care who your customer. I mean, at the end of the day, I want my application or I want my system to be used on as many devices as possible. For somebody like Honeywell, okay, they will be assembling all of their devices somewhere, and they will be using, for example, Future Electronics or somebody like that to deploy those, right? At the end of the day, in order for all of those platforms to be used, and in order for those conversations to be made, we need to start embedding those key functionality sets that will enable the connectivity to those services, and they need to be, how can I say, we need to do away with our own hardware agenda. There's too much hardware in this world. So what I'm saying is anybody that has an embedded software in their own hardware implementation, please, pretty please, talk to the people that are already out there, make use of their own real estate in terms of hardware, and let's share. And let's then start the outcome-based economies, because it's going to help the business model, it's going to help scale. Then Future Electronics can also help companies like Honeywell and everybody else actually deliver much faster and have a much better and easier business model moving forward.
So it's not necessarily controversial, but certainly, yes, the gauntlet's laid. Stop making hardware or start reusing hardware. So do you have a comment, Scott?
Yeah, we're probably not going to stop making hardware, I'm guessing. We're a $40 billion company, so hardware is going to be an important part of it, and it is part of the value, right? Sensors are required. We're a very large sensor company, so I don't think that we'll stop that, all joking aside. I do think that generally speaking in the IoT space, that as we look at it, right, we see I personally, and I think Honeywell, and probably many of you see a lot of opportunity in the space. And we tend to talk about, I think, edge cases, meaning if I can connect, this device to that device, to a building, to the smart city, et cetera, I can create a use case that has a market size of 15 people. We talk a lot about that, and probably don't, historically talk about the products themselves. In the IoT space, I'll talk connected home. If you're a consumer, when you buy a product, you expect it to work, right? You expect your light to turn on when you want it to turn on. You expect your lock to lock or unlock when you want it to. And a lot of the connected devices today don't necessarily do that. I'm not picking on lights or locks. I don't have an example exactly. Don't necessarily do that. So I think there is an important hardware play where these products that consumers deploy actually have to do the job that they're being hired for. I also think from a developer community, so we have a fairly substantial developer community. It's new, right? But it's only about 2 years in the making, but it's fairly substantial now. It's many developers are developing apps to control Honeywell's connected products in the home or in the building, but not necessarily differentiating or driving a whole lot of value. So one of the tricks, I think, whether you're talking smart home, smart building, smart city, anything smart, IoT in general, so we got to find value that people can easily see and tell that story in the products. The hardware piece actually has to do what it's supposed to do. I don't know if that goes directly. I think hardware is an important piece. The software is an important piece. The developer community is an important piece. But it all has to somewhere converge to where it brings value to that user. And when it brings value to the user, you sell more hardware. If you're a hardware company, you create software as a service opportunities. You create really interesting opportunities on data for contractors and service providers that unlock all new business models. It's a pretty exciting space.
I mean, what I hear when you say stop making hardware is stop duplicating hardware that's not needed.
Thank you.
Right? If I've already got, right, if I've already got a temperature sensor, right, in a particular room of my home, I don't need another one just because an additional product requires a temperature sensor. There's already one there. I mean, the thermostat is a great example, and I will pick on Honeywell a little bit here, right? But the thermostat's a great example. It's additional hardware on your wall, which exists to what end? To control a blower, to control, a furnace unit to generate heat, to control a compressor. Well, why do we have that hardware, right, on the wall? You could argue that it's not needed, right? That those individual units should simply be controllable from an intelligence layer, from a platform, from your phone, from wherever, right? And you don't need the thing on the wall. Or, the temperature sensor that's in the thermostat isn't the one, and this is a great use case because it, isn't the one that I want the thermostat to use, right? I don't care what the temperature is in the hallway. I care what the temperature is in my bedroom, in the family room, wherever, right? So is the temperature sensor in that thermostat duplicative in and of itself, right? And of course, we're living in a world where every room doesn't have a temperature sensor in it yet. Every room, every door doesn't have a contact sensor on it yet to tell us, right? But if you look forward, right, is there a point 20 years from now where you can build certain devices with the presumption, right, knowing that those sensors are just already there, so I don't have to duplicate them?
And if not there, I can buy a standard one that then integrates it, allows the platform
That's right.
to. So what you don't understand is we're actually here with you were on the cover of a beautiful magazine, I just saw that. But more importantly, you have a refinery background. Yes, I didn't, that's fantastic. So we've been talking about the home and we're talking about consumer. In some cases, this issue has been addressed and solved. And so to your point, our earlier conversation, we are not having a lot of conversations that are really cross-industry. Even though we think we are, we're not having really share a little bit to the points that were just made here that how is refinery or how is the bigger industry, enterprises, solving or have solved, and what are lessons that we could learn and maybe how does SAP help that learning go through?
Yeah. So great question. Before I joined SAP 5 years back, I was in the industry. I was with Shell for 5 years and Valero for 10 years. So I come from a very long industry background, especially in the oil and gas industry. And I have seen where you walk into any shop floor, the fact that you will have multiple manufacturers, you will have Honeywell equipment, ABB or Siemens, GE. So a heterogeneous landscape is a norm. How you collect the data from all of these equipment from different manufacturers and consolidate that into a platform, what we call OT layer, or Operations Technology Platform, analyze the data, mine the data, and then move it to your ID platform to converge it with the rest of the enterprise applications to derive actions. Let's say predictive maintenance is one of the key use cases that we see in most of the large manufacturing industry. How you're able to monitor that equipment and take action on it before it actually goes down. See the entire stack from the equipment to the platform to aggregating it with enterprise data and taking action on it before that equipment goes down is what pretty much every manufacturing companies are going through today in this IoT journey. And we see quite a lot of companies really making a lot of progress.
But industry has arranged consortiums and other, to try and address that. We're not there yet in the home or civilian or even city space yet. So maybe I'll open the conversation up here is, how do we actually get to that vision? Like, how do we really get there so that the world that you just talked about, the fact that Honeywell will still make equipment, but they don't have to make it so that it is by itself, they know by definition it will automatically connect to a creation of sensors or others. Dejan and his company know that, yes, those, how do we get there? Like, how do we actually truly get there over, what do we argue, 20 years?
Yeah, well, I think part of it's about standards.
Yes.
Right? Part of it's about interoperability and standards that we don't have today. Right? There's even some of the new standards that are being developed today in the IoT space focus on the connectivity as opposed to the semantic or the morphological standard. Yes. Right? How do I talk to that particular sensor? And I don't want to have to know as a developer, I don't want to have to know who made it or what kind of, what the make and model number is. I just want to know what the capabilities of that device are, and I want a standard that allows me to access that device and make use of it without knowing where it is or who made it, right? Or how it got there or how it's connected, right? And today, companies like SmartThings have to solve for these things on our own, right? Because there aren't any standards out there that are followed at that semantic level.
I'm reminded of the cartoon XKCD, right? The stick figure, one of the is a cartoonist. And there is the, why are there so many standards in the world? And it starts with, we should all have one standard. Then there was 15 standards, and now, well, I don't like those, so now there's 16 standards, right? How do we actually get to a standard? Like, what kind of conversation? So maybe Scott, does Honeywell feel that it is in their best interest to actually drive open source your hardware, or as a traditional industrialist, how are you going through that transformation? Because the things that Jeff want are probably scary to the traditional closed hardware ship and forget company, but you're not that anymore. You're a software company, which means now you have to be more open, APIs, and
yeah.
How do you guys get there?
So I'll go to your first question, which when will we get there? And if I had that answer, I'd be somewhere else today, right? I don't know. So we look at Allseen, we look at OCF. If you look at smart lighting space, you have Fair Hair Alliance. There are probably a dozen or so, maybe more, different standards organizations, which just by saying it out loud means there are no standards. So how do you get to a place where every product, it plug and plays into whatever network? I don't know that I have the answer to that. I would say it's very important to us. Part of my team is engaged deeply in all of those standards committees, trying to find a way and maybe shape them to where it's a bit easier for companies like Honeywell or device manufacturers to incorporate a single standard. I go back to the thermostat. I can't see a world where a thermostat is Apple, HomeKit, Google, Brillo, Allseen Alliance, OCF, Thread, or Weave, or whatever that one's called. And whatever, it's just you can't make enough SKUs. It makes no business sense to do that. Which creates different ways of making products, but I don't know that I have the answer other than we would like a standard. Yes, we would support that effort, and we are supporting that effort across all of those groups that I've mentioned.
So you are the one that broached the topic. We've got to open the ecosystem. We've got to broaden the conversation. We have to expand the stage of the players. How do you see that actually happening? Because it's not inherently in people's business models today.
Yep.
It must be in the business models tomorrow, but there's this transformation stage, and so there's going to be those who want to protect the current state. How do you see us getting there and moving that conversation the way that we earlier talked about?
It is to start having conversations with people that have nothing to do with what you're doing today. It is getting outside of your value network. And I mean, all of the business schools, if you go to any MBA, will tell you that even for your own networking, in terms of professional, you need to start talking to people who have nothing to do with what you're doing. I believe that it is the same for all of the industries. All of the standards that have come out, ladies and gentlemen, have come out because there was a business model and there was a threat of disintermediation from a given vendor or a given service provider and the end user. Okay, it wasn't a nice conversation. It's not because we all sat down and had coffee and agreed. It is because there's business to be made or business to be done. We need to start those conversations first. After that, we need to see to see whether or not there is an innovation budget, or that we can do a proof of concept, or we can play with something to try to solve a problem in somebody else's value network by the technology that we have or somebody else. With those kinds of conversations, you will be safe from the innovator's dilemma, because for the most part, what's happening in IoT today, I believe it's a sustaining innovation, okay? To use Mr. Christensen's terms, it is not a disruptive innovation today. The disruptive innovation for very big companies, they will keep on making the right decisions, but they still are going to fail. This is what he argues. So the conversations with people that have nothing to do with your business might actually bring light to a completely new business model. And the only thing that you need to do is assign a small enough team to actually work on it, create a business case, and exactly as I've said, have that conversation, see if it makes sense, and let's start POCing. And through that, and through those kinds of conversations, you might come to a point where you're going to be able to have not the ultimate standard that we all want, but to simplify the deployment of these devices in IoT.
So maybe I'll just open question. I'll ask you, Jeff, this. So there's, when we talk about the Internet of Things, the first word Internet, everyone thinks it's a nice set of standards. And today it might be, but it wasn't when it first started. And in fact, there was an entire process that got created under the RFC process that then evolved into Internet Engineering Task Force, which has now evolved to W3C. A lot of people fail to remember history. So given your background and where you're at, is there a lesson to be learned or adopted from how we approach building the Internet to building the IoT? And if there is, how might this audience take away from that what they should be doing?
I think there is a lesson, and I think the example that comes to mind for me is something as pedestrian as email, right? There was a time, even though the SMTP standard is quite old at this point, there was still a time when the providers like AOL, were doing their own thing with regard to email. And ultimately, the requirement to interoperate, the requirement from the consumer for these things to talk to each other, drove everyone to adopt the standard that we already had, which was SMTP. And then that standard has evolved, right, and gotten better. It's not great, but it's gotten better, right, over the years, right? But it's still a standard, right? It is the way that we get email, right? Sometimes securely, sometimes not so securely, right, from point to point. Ultimately, that, what I think one of the problems that we have in the IoT world is that there's no consumer mandate for these things to work together, right? That doesn't exist. And in part, that's because we're still very much in an early adopter phase from a consumer perspective. Anyone that says that we're, in the early majority on the IoT for the consumer, probably doesn't work in this space, right? Those of us that are in the space knows that this is still very much an early adopter space. But as it shifts, right, I think there will become that mandate, right? People will start self-selecting products that are interoperable, and those that aren't won't get purchased, right? And that economic effect will force integration. So, the question though implies that maybe something's happening today that's not right. I think it's actually happening exactly the way it should, right? I think it's a very evolutionary process. There's a lot of stuff that's being tried today. And hopefully it's going to happen pretty quickly, right, in terms of the down selection of different technologies and standards. But I think it's happening the way it should be.
And I agree, John. The standards will emerge, and they will emerge fairly quickly because the pressure coming from the consumers and also companies is very high right now to make all of this work together. So the market demand will force standards bodies to start releasing standards and having companies adopt to the standards. Yeah.
That actually raises an interesting question, which, okay, so we think we believe there's consumer pressure. Everyone I talk to, right, why would I want to have a connected car door? Or why would I want to have a connected house door? Or why would I want to connect my avocado? I mean, obviously, are we doing enough to educate the consumer, to truly educate the consumer? I mean, Honeywell, you're in the home probably more than most of the folks on the stage. What are you doing to actually educate the consumer base that there is a value proposition and it is something that is to be sought after, right? It's something to be actually appreciated, and in fact, once it's appreciated, something to actually be desired.
Yeah, so I'd say two things. So first, so I would differentiate between connected devices, products that are in the home that have some connectivity, and connected home, which is many products in the home that are connected and controlled together. And while I think that standards piece is more around the connected home space than the devices, I do agree that the consumer is going to end up driving that. Today, there are probably 25 different platforms or players trying. I think that's going to narrow down relatively quickly when consumers begin to buy more than just the device. I don't think anybody wakes up and says, I'm buying a smart home today. They wake up and they say, I'm buying a video doorbell, or they wake up and say, I want a thermostat today because my thermostat's broken. So what's Honeywell doing about it? We look at the market in two ways. There's a DIY space that is either direct to consumer or a retailer, and there's a lot of work that has to be done in that space to help retailers or really ultimately the consumer understand what's going on in the space. But one of Honeywell's big powerful, one of our special qualities is our contractor channel. And when I look at the connected home space, in my opinion, the clear winners today are the professional security dealers, where they go in, the consumer actually doesn't have to make very many decisions. It's, do I buy from ABC Alarm or do I buy from XYZ Alarm? And the security dealer provides the entire ecosystem that's been tested. They know that it works, it gets installed, there's a recurring revenue model. They sometimes get paid or often get paid for the installation piece. It's a really strong business model. With that consumer actually not having to do too much work to become educated. If you were to try and go online just as a consumer from not in this space and figure out and build out a smart home, it's darn near impossible today. It's very, very difficult. There has to be 15 different Works With programs out there, and not all Works With programs are equal, and not all Works With partners actually works with the products that they claim to work with. And so there's a lot of challenges from the consumer piece that I think have to be solved, and I think there's a retail play. I think there's a manufacturer telling the story better. I think there's retailers have to tell the story better and figure out better how to merchandise. I think professional contractors have maybe still the biggest opportunity. An HVAC contractor, 80,000 HVAC contractors with Honeywell, that can broaden their world very easily and simply by educating the consumer when they're in the house every single day and becoming a smart home provider as opposed to an HVAC contractor. But it's one of the hurdles, I think, before you get to the mass adoption that has to be cleared.
Well, and I think you touched on two really important things: the professional installer channel or opportunity and the do-it-yourself space. And one of the really important things here is the interoperability across both of those use cases. I want to start with a professionally installed system, but then I want to add my own stuff to it that I pick up at a Best Buy or a Costco or wherever, right? Or I want to start with a do-it-yourself system, and then I want a professional installer to come in and add to that and add services to it. And that interoperability today is a little bit broken, right? That's key, I think, to mass adoption here, that no matter where the customer starts, that they're not limited in terms of what they're able to accomplish.
So you talked about business value outcome driving this transformation, right? Business value outcome, most homeowners, I mean, their thought process is, is it warm? Is it comfortable? Am I safe? Am I secure? But we don't talk about KPIs we do as a conversation, but at home as a homeowner, we're not talking about KPIs. So from an SAP perspective, you're very much corporate focused, but the true revolution is when the entire mass adoption occurs. So how do you see that educational process happening over the next, I don't know, is it 2, 3, 10? What's the time frame, and how do you see it happening?
So John, we actually work with pretty much all the major consumer product customers out there, right? Procter & Gamble, Nestle's of the world, Whirlpool's of the world, all the major consumer product companies are a customer of SAP. And the evolution they are going through, for example, if they manufacture a washing machine, they actually, when the consumer buys a washing machine, the manufacturer wants to make sure that before that washing machine breaks or anything happens to that, they're able to send a technician out there, service it, and constantly monitor that machine or a coffee machine the same way. So what we see evolution happening is what I call ambient intelligence. Ambient intelligence,
Yep.
right? So when I walk into my house, I want my house to know exactly what I like, right? What is the temperature I like, how I want the lighting to be, shades, what flavor of coffee I like depending on the day. And so I want my entire house to recognize me as an individual, what I like, my likes and dislikes. Similarly, when I walk into my car, I want my car to recognize me. So what we see is ambient intelligence evolving around a consumer when the consumer is traveling. So every company has to work together to bring this ambient intelligence, which requires standards, which requires everyone to really figure out how you make that consumer really comfortable. So that's what I say is ultimate outcome for that consumer, right?
So I tend to agree with you, but I do have a position that says, you know, the smart home has to be reasonably dumb. I don't want the house to outsmart me, the homeowner, right? I don't want it to be cold when I want it to be warm. So I don't want the house to make all of my decisions for me necessarily, or the ambience, but I do think that that's an important piece.
You don't want Hal. You don't want, no Dave.
Right, Skynet. Right, Skynet. So I think just at consumers, you know, I look at my schedule or my family's schedule, and if my house was making decisions based on what it thinks we're doing on a day-to-day basis, it's going to be wrong a lot. And so again, we joke internally at Honeywell that the smart home has to have some dumbness to it. I really don't want to be outsmarted by my house.
So maybe fast forward 20 years, you never know what the world will look like, right? So
That's true, but if your machine breaks down, you're going to probably be upset at the service provider or whoever, because it's not smart enough. I completely agree. There is a modularity here. There are some things that will get embedded into those, all of those appliances and everything else. And I completely agree that needs to be interoperability and some intelligence being shared here in order to make sure that the things that are mission critical, for a house, okay, that they work without an issue, because otherwise it's not a dumb house. Otherwise it becomes even more of a mess because something breaks down. You don't know who to call. You don't know who's, who is liable. And, but all the same, you're not able to, wash your clothes. So.
Good. Okay. So I'm conscious of time, and I do want to get maybe this one last question that we all can reflect on. This would be the bar conversation. This would be the conversation in the bar that we'd have, behind dark walls, which is, so we want to mix professional installers with DIYs with an opportunity to go either way. We want to take consumers who are themselves industrialists and have learned the world through the industry, bringing it to their homes and others. We want to connect the unconnectable or the unconnected in ways that we've never thought before. So that's the setting. Do we know enough about what we're doing to actually do this in a way that guarantees safety and security in 20 years' time for those people and those industries that we're pushing this envelope for?
Yes, Kim and
yeah, well, it's open. It's open. It's an open, yeah.
Data privacy and security are big issues, right? Safety, beyond that, is a big issue, right? One of the things that we hear when we talk about opening up, right, and that we hear from different manufacturers that we're working with, right, is, well, wait a minute, you're a platform that just lets developers write apps for these devices. I don't want you to just let any developer publish an app that's going to control that thermostat, right, or open and close the garage door, because there are safety issues, right? What happens if I cycle the blower on the thermostat on and off as fast as I can, 100 times a minute, right? What happens, right? Certainly there are reliability concerns that would come for that, but maybe there's even safety concerns that would come out of that. So safety, privacy, information security, all big problems, right? No doubt about it. I think, yes, no, we don't know enough today, but in the same way that standards are evolving very, very quickly, right? I think this is an area where, again, the consumers and the market is going to force us to get very mature very quickly.
Well, why I raise it, and again, in the bar, is like, if, as I said, if Target can get hacked, I mean, if Home Depot, if major government, if the Office of Management and Personnel, the United States government can get hacked, what's going to stop, you know, our houses and our homes, right? Which brings these new questions, right? So, where do you think we're at in terms of the conversation? You don't have to talk about the solution. Where are we at in terms of the conversation, and where do we need to get to in terms of the conversation? If in fact this is really going to be
around security specifically?
Well, yeah, security and safety in terms of what we're doing as we go down these paths.
Yeah, so if anybody is creating software or hardware for the home or business that's connected and the privacy, safety, security isn't kind of all tied for number one in priorities of what you talk about every single day, there's something wrong. It's certainly that way at Honeywell. How that evolves over time is actually, I don't think it changes, right? So all of the security in the world, some smart person is going to figure out a way around it, and then they'll build ways to protect against that, and somebody else will figure that out, and they'll build ways to protect against that. So it's constant vigilance, and 20 years from now, who the heck knows? I can't, I can't prognosticate 5 years out, in the way that the space is moving today, but yeah, I think it has to be, concern number one, priority number one across the business, and not just today, like we're going to solve it today, but we got to solve it today, and we're going to have to solve it tomorrow, and next week, next month, next year, over and over and over again.
Completely agree. There comes a point of certification when it comes to deploying a smart home or whatever else, and this is a conversation that we need to have, and the evolving standards. But for example, today, Spirent helps customers solve this because we've got a team that does ethical hacking in the automotive space. There are ways today to make sure that the implementations for the next year, 2 years, or 3 years are good enough, and you keep on certifying and you keep on testing. That's why test, certification, and measurement is still a big value to the IoT world.
And John, to add to that, security is not an option, it's a requirement for every industry. It doesn't matter whether it's consumer industry, whether it is retail industry, whether it is logistics, manufacturing, every industry, it's a requirement, whether we are securing homes and consumer data or whether we are securing industrial assets and big refining assets. So we have done that for ages in industry world, and I see that evolving into the consumer world also now, very fairly quickly. But it's going to, all the companies have to come together to figure out what those standards are and how robust and secure we make it for our consumers as they start evolving using IoT applications.
Fantastic. Well, Scott, Jeff, Nayyar, and Dan, thank you so very much for joining me on stage this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to our panelists for their time this morning. 2 housekeeping messages. Number 1, if you registered for speed networking, you are going to be literally right outside these doors here in the coffee area. For the rest of you, you are more than welcome to join into a live demo of some high industrial equipment that's going to be demonstrated in the exhibit floor. When you walk out of here, go look for the tire marks that are on the floor, follow those tire marks, the tire tracks, and they will lead you into the exhibit area. Thank you so very much for your time for the last 2 hours this morning. We appreciate it, and the panelists will be around for questions later. Thank you.